Chernobyl left behind 4 objects so dangerous, most people have never even heard of them. A steel claw so radioactive it still emits a lethal dose. A factory basement hiding material the USSR never explained. Firefighters' uniforms that can kill you with a single touch. And a mass of nuclear lava that scientists now think may be reactivating. Each one has a story, and one of them is far more dangerous today than it was in 1986. Stay with me, because the final one might be the biggest threat still lurking beneath Chernobyl. Hidden deep within the thick forests surrounding Pripyat sits one of the most disturbing artifacts left behind by the Chernobyl catastrophe. A massive steel claw, frozen mid-motion, originally attached to a crane used in the frantic cleanup after the Reactor 4 explosion, this monstrous device has unintentionally become a memorial to the disaster. Still so contaminated that touching it could be deadly. This mechanical grabber, later dubbed the Claw of Death, began its grim legacy in the chaotic days following April 26, 1986. When Chernobyl's reactor erupted in a violent burst of steam and fire, the force of the blast launched control rods, fuel fragments, and highly radioactive graphite blocks, some weighing several hundred pounds, onto the surrounding rooftops. The graphite, having soaked up tremendous amounts of radiation from the reactor core, turned those rooftops into some of the most dangerously radioactive surfaces on the planet. Stepping onto them for even a minute meant receiving a fatal dose, the kind of exposure no protective gear could possibly guard against. In the early stages of the cleanup, Soviet teams confronted a nearly impossible problem. The radioactive graphite had to be cleared to keep contamination from spreading, but neither workers nor most machines could operate there long enough to survive. Robots were deployed to handle the debris, but the extreme radiation destroyed their electronics in minutes. With almost no alternatives left, Soviet crews resorted to using heavy machinery like the crane fitted with this claw, a last line of defense tasked with pushing radioactive chunks back into the ruined reactor. Each time the claw scooped up another piece of debris, radiation permeated deeper into the metal. By the time the job was over, the claw itself had become so irradiated that it was essentially unusable, a tool now nearly as radioactive as the material it had handled. After the emergency operations ended, the claw was transported, or possibly just abandoned, in an isolated stretch of forest, far away from people. Decades later, in 2019, archaeologist Robert Maxwell came across it during a private tour. Armed with a Geiger counter, he walked up to the claw and instantly understood its lingering danger. "When I encountered the claw, let's just say it was screamingly radioactive," Maxwell told news.au. The Geiger counter wailed as the readings shot past 39.8 microsieverts per hour, hundreds of times above normal background radiation. Over the course of a single day, the claw emits around 950 microsieverts, a dose high enough to cause serious health effects for anyone who stays near it. Maxwell described how the experience demanded constant awareness. "You're always thinking about contamination," he said, pointing out that radioactive dust can stick to clothing, skin, or be inhaled, a silent threat to anyone who lingers. Yet despite warnings and its infamous reputation, the claw continues to attract adventurous visitors. One controversial photo shows 2 women actually climbing inside the claw, smiling as though it were a harmless amusement park attraction. Today, the claw still sits untouched in the forest. Locals say it will likely remain exactly where it is, a piece of machinery too dangerous to move, too contaminated to dismantle, and too radioactive to ever truly forget. In the damp, shadow-soaked basement of Pripyat's long-abandoned Jupiter factory, something unsettling waits in silence. Massive containers filled with black and gray sand, infused with radioactive particles, sit as if they're hiding secrets left behind by the Chernobyl disaster. Was this sand part of an abandoned experiment, a remnant of something far more ominous? Why would such dangerously radioactive material be stored beneath a factory that was supposed to be civilian? When it opened in 1980 on the edge of what is now the deserted city, the Jupiter factory publicly produced cassette players and household electronics. But in reality, its official purpose concealed a deeper mission: covert semiconductor work supporting the needs of the Soviet military. It has even become a cultural entity, appearing in post-apocalyptic games like DayZ, where the modded Namalsk map features a research institute that is essentially a one-to-one recreation of the real Jupiter factory. And in a way, that digital version mirrors the truth, the secrecy, the hidden labs, and the unsettling reality that the USSR buried deep below this place, including the radioactive dust still sitting in its basement. At its peak, the factory employed more than 3,500 people. Even after the 1986 Chernobyl accident, Jupiter continued operating quietly, conducting radiological research until its final shutdown in 1996. As rumors surrounding its secretive military role grew, so did curiosity about the basement, now infamous for storing containers filled with a mysterious powder. The sand itself, a dark, grayish-black material, is said to be intensely radioactive. Explorers who ventured inside have measured levels exceeding 2,500 microsieverts per hour. A scientific enthusiast who analyzed samples reported the presence of elements directly tied to the RBMK reactor at Chernobyl. Strontium-90, cesium-137, even traces of plutonium. In a region already known for severe contamination, these readings rank among the highest outside the reactor core. Adding to the eerie atmosphere, rows of labeled soil bags line the surrounding shelves. Some believe these sample bags were part of Jupiter's secondary mission, early research into decontamination methods for the exclusion zone. Another theory suggests that the sand may connect to a production process in which the RBMK 1000 reactor was used to irradiate silicon ingots, creating neutron-doped silicon, a critical material for nuclear detection equipment. Others argue that Jupiter may have played a role in covert nuclear weapons research, though its size and layout make such theories unlikely. Facilities like the Mayak complex were specifically designed and tightly secured for that kind of work, far from civilian areas. One recent explorer claimed the sand was nothing more than active carbon used in protective filtration systems. According to his Reddit post, the high readings in the room didn't come from the sand at all, but from nearby objects, including an old shoe and a bag of firefighter gear used in the early cleanup efforts. As Jupiter sinks deeper into ruin, the strange sand in its basement remains a lingering reminder of the factory's hidden dual identity. Was this gray powder simply leftover material from Soviet decontamination research? Or is it the last unsolved mystery lying beneath the quiet remains of Pripyat? The basement of Pripyat Hospital number 126 contains no human remains, yet it may be one of the most chilling burial chambers of the modern age. Deep beneath the decaying Soviet-era medical complex lie the uniforms, helmets, and boots of the very first firefighters who responded to the Chernobyl explosion. Items so intensely radioactive that nearly 40 years later, they can still deliver a fatal dose within hours. This hospital, situated on Druzhby Narodov Street, once served the city's 49,000 residents, many of whom worked at the nearby nuclear plant. Its rooftop carried a hopeful motto: "Health of the nation, the country's wealth." But within the first moments of April 26, 1986, that slogan collapsed along with Reactor 4's roof. Lieutenant Vladimir Pravik and his team felt the shockwaves that would change history forever. They didn't wait for orders. Almost immediately, they sped toward the rising plume above the nuclear plant. What began as a 14-man crew quickly grew into a massive emergency response effort. 37 fire brigades, 186 firefighters operating 81 engines from across the Kiev region, raced to a disaster that none of them truly understood. Fighting against physics itself, Pravik's men faced the daunting task of reaching the reactor's rooftop, towering 230 feet above them. With the plant's own firefighting systems destroyed by the explosion, the crews were forced to run hoses by hand. They worked in temperatures over 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit, battling flames fueled by 70 tons of uranium and 900 tons of graphite, unaware that the radiation saturating the air was 6 to 7 times deadlier than a lethal dose. An estimated 20,000 Röntgen per hour. By dawn, Hospital 126 was overflowing with casualties. No official announcement had yet been made, but by 10 a.m., 108 firefighters and plant employees had already arrived. Many still wearing the radioactive gear they had fought in standard procedure, required contaminated workers to be decontaminated at the plant before transport. But in the chaos, that step was skipped. Instead, the toxic clothing was ripped off and dumped into the hospital basement, where it remains untouched to this day. That single decision turned the underground space into one of the most hazardous locations in Pripyat. The price of the firefighters' bravery was severe and immediate. Pripyat and his team had spent precious minutes atop the reactor's roof, blasting water directly onto the burning core. The radiation exposure was so extreme, it reportedly altered the color of Pripyat's eyes. Out of the 237 responders who later developed acute radiation syndrome, 28 died within the first 3 months. Today, visitors with Geiger counters report readings in the basement that still spike beyond measurable limits. Yet the danger hasn't stopped thrill seekers. In recent years, disaster tourists have descended into the basement, and some have even stolen pieces of it. One firefighter's helmet vanished entirely, leaving behind only its highly radioactive straps. A grim reminder that these objects are not simply historical artifacts, but lethal remnants of a disaster that continues to haunt the area. Throughout the hospital, traces of the sudden evacuation remain frozen in time. Patient charts sit scattered across desks. The maternity ward holds rusting empty cribs. Surgical instruments lie waiting for procedures that never happened. But it is the basement, still filled with deadly relics, that tells the darkest and most enduring story of all. Deep within the ruins of the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant, a silent but unsettling threat lingers. This is room 3052, a decaying chamber where neutron readings, the telltale sign of possible nuclear reactions, have been steadily rising for the past 4 years. At the center of this danger is a terrifying remnant of the 1986 catastrophe, a mass of radioactive corium, the same molten substance that created the infamous elephant's foot. When Reactor 4 detonated, it unleashed a blazing inferno with temperatures soaring above 2,900 degrees Fahrenheit. The intense heat liquefied uranium fuel rods, concrete, steel, and even sand, blending everything into a molten radioactive flow weighing close to 100 tons. This lethal mixture oozed through cracks and utility shafts, cascading downward like lava. As it cooled, it solidified into grotesque shapes, jagged drips, warped waves, and ultimately the elephant's foot itself. This 2-ton lump of corium, darkened and wrinkled like its namesake, was discovered 8 months after the explosion. At that time, its radiation output was a horrifying 10,000 Roentgen per hour, strong enough to kill a person just minutes after approaching it. Even photographing it was nearly impossible. Film melted, electronics failed, and equipment shut down in the intense radiation. Researchers, desperate for samples, attempted to drill into the hardened glass-like surface and failed. Eventually, they resorted to firing a Kalashnikov rifle at it to chip off small fragments for study. But the danger didn't end in the 1980s. Today, Room 3052 presents a new and worrying mystery. Rising neutron levels suggest that pockets of the corium may be attempting to restart low-level fission, even as the room itself collapses. Part of the ceiling has fallen in, and a loose steel plate from the reactor structure now hangs precariously above the corium formations. The combination of extreme radiation and structural decay makes the area far too hazardous for direct investigation. To analyze what's happening, scientists have turned to controlled laboratory environments. Using real materials from the disaster, they have created synthetic versions of the corium, hoping to understand how this radioactive lava behaves as it ages and breaks down, and how to prevent it from triggering new reactions. As neutron levels continue their worrying climb, the proposed solution is anything but simple. Engineers are preparing to send specialized robots into room 3052 to bore into the formations and insert boron rods, materials capable of absorbing excess neutrons and stopping potential chain reactions. The challenge is immense. The once rock-hard corium has weakened over time, crumbling at the slightest contact. Each attempt requires painstaking precision to avoid unintentionally releasing radioactive dust into the air. Even the elephant's foot, once so dense it resisted power tools and gunfire, has deteriorated into a brittle, sand-like material. This disintegration raises fresh concerns. Any disturbance could send clouds of radioactive particles throughout the chamber. Adding to the complexity is the delicate balance of moisture within room 3052. Too much humidity or too little, and the conditions could shift in a way that enables renewed fission. It's a tightrope that must be carefully monitored. Chernobyl's story is far from finished. As these disturbing relics continue to resist time and decay, they remain a stark warning. The forces unleashed on that April night in 1986 are still active, still dangerous, and still influencing the future in ways we are only beginning to understand. Which of these remnants do you believe hides the greatest unknown secrets? Share your thoughts in the comments.